My name's Ronald Ennis. I've been raised on Charles Newland Road over here, basically all my life. My family is from the neighborhood of Charles Newland Road. I come from the Popes, I come from the Lamberts, I come from the Lockamies. I come, of course, from the Ennises, Godwins, Lees, just name it, they're in here. I tell people all the time that you can't talk about anybody around here because if you do, you're talking about your kin. So people have to realize that be careful when you're throwing off on someone that lives in this community. What I'm going to try to tell today is something that my grandfather told me, who I might add raised me most of my life. I was born by an unwed mother. My real father was out of the picture and never was in my life. But my grandfather, like I said, he ended up a sharecropper. He was a white slave. I remember one of the stories my uncle told me one time. He said Daddy moved to where he could get a better house. He said he was constantly on the move. He said he'd worked with somebody for 2 or 3 years. And if a neighbor down the road offered him a better house, he was gone. And they'd be on a different farm the next year.
Yeah, because nobody made a lot of money sharecropping, but the one thing you did afford you was hopefully the person you're sharecropping for had a house to house your family. So
that's
the
right.
only real, you wouldn't quote unquote get a raise, but you could get a nicer house.
You get a better house. You get a better house. But my grandfather was an interesting man. He, like I said, he was self-taught. He learned how to read and write on his own. He learned how to add and subtract. In fact, he could add and subtract better than most cash registers. Faster too. He couldn't tell you how he did it, but he could do it.
Right.
I'd come home from school sometime and I'd say, Papa, what's the answer to this? And he'd say, well, what is it? And I'd tell him so and so and so and so. And he'd say, 105, 320, whatever the answer was. And I'd say, well, how did you get it? Well, I don't know, but that's the answer. And when I would finally work it out, that would be the answer. He couldn't always tell you exactly how he got it, but he got it. But he was an interesting man. He worked hard all his life. My mother was one of his children. He had 5 children, 4 boys and a girl. And my mother was one of them. And she didn't do too bad. But a little bit about me. When I was a little boy, I was running around and of course, like I said, my mother was an unwed woman. And men would come by and see her. And they'd find out about me and they wouldn't come back no more. Mm-hmm. In fact, Brad Paisley wrote a song about me, and I know he did. He had somebody looking around at me. But one day, Broadus Phillips, who lived over on Altar Mill Road, come up to the house. And he had this man with him. The man got out. He had he had a white t-shirt on, big old broad chest, muscled arms. Got out and we were sitting on the porch and he came up Broadus came up and introduced him. He said, this is Rudolph Ennis. He's from Coates, North Carolina. So, won't took long, a day or two, he came back to see my mother. And of course he knew about me from the start with, which was kind of strange to me that he came back, but he came back. And he kept coming back. There was something there he liked. And some months later, one Saturday morning, he came driving up. And I noticed that Mother had got up that morning and put her on a real nice dress, you know, got all flossed up. She said, we'll be back after a while. Well, I didn't know that after a while was going to be all day. But late that afternoon, they came back, and they had been to Dillon, South Carolina, and got married. So she said, she told me that they were going to go by and pick up his two sons. His first wife had burnt to death in a fire and left him with two boys. And then we were going to Coates and live with him. I didn't want to leave Granny and Grandma. That's been my home since I was born, you know. But I went along. We go pick up them two boys, and Wayne, who is my brother next to me, we decided we'd find out who was the biggest man the first day. So we fought like cats and dogs, and they finally broke us up. And to this day, we probably never figured out which one was the best man. But anyhow, he took us on the Coates, and one day he asked me, he said, would you like for you to have my name? And I liked him, liked Wayne and Jimmy. And I said, well, sure, it was time to go to school. And he said, well, would you like for me to adopt you and give you my name? And I said, sure. So I started out to school at Coates, North Carolina, as an Ennis. And I've had that name ever since, all my life. But it doesn't take much for a man that is equipped to be a father. Any man can be a father. But you got to work on being a daddy. And that's what I said at his funeral. You got to work at being a daddy. Now, he was tough. He was a tough man. He was old school. When he whooped one of us, he whooped all three of us. When he didn't make no difference between his kids and me. He treated me just exactly like he treated his toys. And we grew up like that. And then him and Mama had a boy, another boy. So that made four of us. And then they had a girl. So they had yours, mine, and ours, all in one family. Rudolph Ennis was my hero. Now, when I became 13 years old, I would come down every summer and stay with my grandparents during summer, and I'd work, and we'd use that money to buy my school clothes. And then when school started back, I had to go back, you know, go to school. Well, I'd been there one summer. I turned 13 during that summer, and my grandmother was a cripple. She was an invalid. She was in a wheelchair. And by the time I got 12 years old, I was a pretty good, big, strapping boy. And if we went anywhere, I would take the wheelchair out and put it in the car. Well, I'd take her and put her in the car. Then I'd take the wheelchair out and put it in the trunk of the car. We called them the boot. And when we got to where we were going, I would take the wheelchair in. I'd pick her up in my arms, and she didn't weigh much. She was a little small one. I'd pick her up in my arms, take her in, put her in the wheelchair. When we got back, it was the same trip. And when the summer was over that year, my grandfather said, I'm going to talk to your mother about letting you come and stay all the time. Well, that was fine with me, you know. I love to be down here anyhow. So he went back, he took me home, took all my clothes and everything. And we got to we got the coats, and he talked to my mother, and she said, no. And he talked to her a little bit more, and she said, well, you'll have to talk to your daddy before I'm not going to let you go on my own. So when Daddy got home, he talked to him, and he knew what the situation was with my mama, my grandmother, and they let me come down. So she lived from then to 1964, and that's how I got a strong back, I reckon. I lugged her around till she died, and my grandfather passed away 3 years after that. So it's just me telling stories and that. Thank you.